Hi everybody, thank you for coming. So for a little bit of historical perspective, I'd like to go back to UDS Jaunty 2008 in Mountain View. And we had a session where we were talking about the fact that one of the things we needed most in Linux and free software in general was good design, and how difficult it was to get designers involved in free software projects because the culture of design and the culture of like hacker culture are so very, very different. So we struggled for a while to figure out how to get designers involved. And I think one of the beautiful things about Ubuntu now is the fact that we do have such amazing expert designers that we have to work with. But design is a very different experience than development, and I think sometimes it's really valuable to just sort of do a little cross-cultural exploration, you know, get to know each other and how we work and what we think about, you know, what we dream about. So this session is one of 3 sessions. One session we had yesterday was an idea about how we can get community members more involved in design. And we're going to have a more detailed planning session on that later this week. But this session is really more about getting to know the designers we have and helping them get to know the rest of the community.
Okay, so thank you for coming along. So we've got all of the designers, for all of the canonical designers who work on the Ubuntu desktop here. So I'll just go around and introduce ourselves first, and then we can share a bit of work, have a panel Q&A, and then we've got some various things we've brought along to show off and have a play with and talk around. So first of all, over here we've got Otto. Otto's the lead visual designer. So he's ultimately in charge of the visual styling, the appearance, the visual taste, the themes for the Ubuntu desktop. Next to Otto we've got Christian. Would you like to introduce some of the things you've worked on?
Yeah, I'm Christian. I work on the design team on the desktop, and I work on the bits and bobs. I have an experience in the past of a rich interface, and basically I work on the launcher, and over the scoreboards, and other things which that will be seen soon.
Okay, then we've got MPT here.
Hi, I've been working on Ubuntu design since 2006 when Mark asked me to design the installer. Since then I've done various things including Ubuntu Software Center, some of the networking settings, a lot of the indicator menus, update manager, lots of things.
And then Mika.
Hi, my name is Mika. I'm an interaction designer. So I do a lot of like conceptual work around information architectures, flows, behaviors, kind of stuff, and a lot of it's kind of future facing. But for this cycle, I work on the login also. So the Unity grid based on like the.
And then Stuart.
Yeah, so I'm a user experience architect on the desktop team. So I have quite a technical background. So I sort of build quite, I guess, elaborate specifications. I think prototypes are an excellent way to communicate designs. I've quite a lot of experience in working sort of tightly with developers. So yeah, I've been working on things like multiple monitors this cycle.
Beast over there.
Yeah. That's the prototyping rig. My name's John Lee. I'm a UX architect. I've got the overall responsibility for the UX of the Ubuntu desktop, and I've probably worked on most bits of the desktop at some point or another, and on an ongoing basis as well. So, just briefly before going into a panel, just over to Mika. So I'm not sure how many of you are aware of the design.canonical.com.
Well, yeah, we're just showing it sort of in a half-completed state, I think. So.
There's one. So on design.canonical.com, there's design.canonical.com/the toolkit, and we haven't published much there yet, but we're hoping to publish lots more in the future and to get more of our design specifications open. The first one that we've managed to package together and publish there is the Unity Greeter spec that Mika's done.
Wait a second. Let's not keep talking about the team. I think the purpose of this meeting is to show who we are, what we think, and that'll be our perception about 360 degrees, I guess, not just about the design implementation. I think the design blog has been our kind of channel for the design canonical to try to express what we like in terms of maybe it can be photos, pictures, can be motion graphics, 360 really. And there is actually besides the blog itself, there's a small project that we just started recently, which unfortunately is not finished yet, which we can
we can show, but unfortunately we can't just give out the URL yet because it's not.
There's a bit of a
it
backlist.
needs some tidying up, and we don't want everybody looking at it until it's totally tidied up, I'm afraid. So I'm sorry for people that are.
So this is the
designers are perfectionists, in case you hadn't noticed.
Of course. So this is just a little initiative, to be honest, which hopefully can help a bit better to express who we are, what we like, what we love, I guess. So this is a microsite which just been built, and basically was we kind of interrogated ourselves, how it is, working in Canonical, and so how Canonical, has been seen, from a design perspective, as outside. And there are some pictures drawn by ourselves with some explanation. This is, for instance, Otto's. But probably we don't need to go into details, I guess.
No.
But when it will be ready, I guess you can read each one.
Yeah, we should hopefully be putting it live pretty soon. Once we get back to London, we're just going to tidy it up a little bit, and then everybody can have a proper look at it. But right now, it's not tidied up to the standard that we would want to release it, unfortunately.
So I guess the purpose of this and also the design blog is that to not only communicate what we think, it's good for it's interesting, inspiring for everyone, but also yes, to have a more personal channel communication, I guess.
Yeah, we're just going to show some more ones.
So there's this alias composition. There's a bit of many things. So. There's a John actually. But yeah, the picture itself doesn't say much. It's expressed, so there's also lengthy text.
But it'll be launched soon. You can have a look at it when it's ready.
It's a small initiative. Hopefully we're gonna make many others in the future.
Should we have a quick look at the the spec we published? So I think that gives a good example of the various different forms of output that we produce and some of the steps we go through.
Just 1 second.
If we go through to design.canonical.com.
Yeah, I could. Show you where that is.
Okay, so this
Right,
is,
there it is,
if we go back up to the toolkit level. Okay, so if we scroll down a bit, you can see we haven't published too much here, but this is where we hope to publish specifications. If we go to the Unity Greeter.
It's just right. Yeah, this is the collection of all the materials. I keep on clicking on it.
This is really nice. Not only being opened by the software, but also being opened by the design specification. It's really, really nice.
Okay. Cool. So this covers a selection of kind of the output that we produce for every element. So we have a UX spec in Google Docs. This goes through, it looks at the wireframes. We do a lot of work with use cases, going down, defining the primary scenarios, all the variations and failure cases, and looking at the functional architecture of what we're building. Also the IA as well. We've got the visual design assets there, also ready to be downloaded. A lot of stuff we do involves transitions and animations. And so for each piece of work, we explore a number of different options.
And that's becoming increasingly important. I think it's also a very, very easy way to translate the message very directly, exactly what we're hoping to achieve, sort of perfectly and concisely. So I think we'll want to include that a lot more in the future too.
And when something's landed in Ubuntu, so for instance, the launch has been around for quite a while, the dash has been quite a while, then we track the changes and we iterate via Launchpad. So we've got a link there to all the Launchpad bugs. So yeah, any questions? Anything you've ever wanted to ask anyone who works on designing Unity?
Who's seen the video?
I've had a burning question as Ubuntu developer for quite some time, and I understand that the design team needs to use some tools that don't necessarily work on Ubuntu in the current state. And as the guy who makes Windows software work on Ubuntu, it has been sort of my personal goal to get the design team eating our own dog food, much like the software people have to. And so the question I would like is that if I can get every single one of your applications working to some extent, can I force you all to use Ubuntu? And
Force isn't a nice word.
Well, running under wine, you mean? No.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, I don't really have a problem with that.
So there are a couple of different roles in the design team.
Right.
For the visual designers, Photoshop, Illustrator, and more heavyweight applications, that's going to be more difficult. But for people working on the UX, we have to use Ubuntu every day. So the way we do that is we run Ubuntu, and then inside Ubuntu we run VirtualBox. And for instance, the main wireframing application I use is Visio. That's the only thing that's not an Ubuntu piece of software I use. But I've set up VirtualBox, so I've got Visio running in an Ubuntu window. I can copy and paste from Ubuntu to Visio, and otherwise it's completely seamless. A few new people have started in the team recently. Getting Macs to run Ubuntu can be a bit problematic. We screwed up a Mac OS X installation in the process when we were trying that 2 weeks ago. So we hope to fix that this week. But yeah, if we're designing a desktop, we need to be using it every day.
I think it's an ongoing conversation, ongoing discussion, to be honest. And there are points from both sides that why we should always use Ubuntu, why we shouldn't. So I'm not sure there's an absolute answer. But
it's equally important to use Windows and Mac OS and other operating systems on mobile devices to have a wide understanding. But for day-to-day use.
Yeah, I think we actually all probably make an effort to use all OSs. So we're not missing what the developments and things that are going on in all of them.
For sure. Part of my own personal mission here is that I actually care about the wine experience too, and so if I can force you to go through it, you'll consider the implications of how it affects the.
I don't think you'd need to force us. You could certainly encourage us, but because we have to be productive. So
of course,
the visual designers must be able to use Photoshop. I personally use Illustrator, in the same way that John uses Visio in a VirtualBox. So.
Hypothetically, I get the application working perfectly, and then you have to use it in Unity, and you discover the unfortunate implications of the design of Unity that cause running Photoshop to be a pain through Wine, then that sort of makes you consider that problem.
How well does Photoshop work now through?
It depends on the version.
I guess the problem being that
I was on a panel earlier this year at LinuxCon that the Adobe folks organized, and what they asked in the session was, is not having the Adobe applications on Linux a significant blocker to people switching fully over to Linux? Yes.
I think Alan Bell asked an interesting question on the screen there.
Yeah.
That we should probably talk about.
I don't think that it's necessarily that GIMP or Inkscape don't do things. It's just, some of us have been particularly selected from industries where we've had like 10 or 15 years experience using particular pieces of software that we're so familiar with. You don't think about how to do something, you just do it. And so it would be an enormous transition. I mean, I do use GIMP sometimes and Inkscape, but they're not my primary things. I didn't grow up on that, so maybe if I had, I would. I mean, at the moment, I would say from GIMP's point of view, it's like when we're creating widgetry in Photoshop, it's like all layer styles. You're drawing very, very little. You're just tweaking lots of stuff, and currently we can't do that.
I can specifically answer the question about why I can't use Inkscape and Pencil for wireframing. And it's just linked to productivity. So, you know, when we build user journeys, they usually consist of, say, 20 artboards, which are very similar. So we very quickly, you know, we might create the start of the journey, and then we would copy a page and change aspects of it. So obviously for pencil, that would be lots and lots of redrawing. You know, computers make things easy with copy and paste, and you know, so I used multiple artboards in Illustrator. You know, I think Inkscape struggles to, you know, to keep up. You know, what, you know, well, we don't have multi-sheet drawing, so and it is just the way you learn to use your tools. I mean, you know, I did used to use GIMP before I transitioned to Photoshop, and unfortunately, I feel I can't go back because there are specific tools which are missing for me.
I think what Alan Bell is getting at is that the best chance, you know, we have in the free software community to fix these tools are to get the input from the kind of people that really use them.
Sure.
And so I think what he's saying is that you guys could be a powerful resource if you wanted to be in helping us get our tools right.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a bit like the design theater, but like a step beyond. So
Yeah.
it's a long-term project. Like, that's not something you're going to do.
And if somebody fancies building me layer styles, I'll be very happy to start.
Couple suggestions here.
Yeah,
I think you know, we love to be involved in that, definitely. Just I think the perception was actually that there wasn't really this open channel, to be honest. But if there is, we're definitely open.
Yeah. I mean, when we're doing wireframes and going through user journeys, a mid-size spec can have between 100 and 200 wireframes, and you're iterating these 100 to 200 wireframes. You know, one change has to cascade through, and there's a set of tools. I know how to do that very quickly in Visio.
I think actually Alan was referring to an app called Pencil rather than a physical pencil.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right. Pencil with a capital P.
That one,
I mean, we can all use pencils.
There's actually two apps called Pencil, and they're both in software.
I see, not HB Pencil, I get it.
And basically, number two.
Sorry.
And Alan Bell, this is Dan Rabbit speaking. I do every single bit of design I've ever done for Ubuntu. I've done in Inkscape. So there are people doing design for Ubuntu in completely open source tools. It does happen.
Sorry, over here.
I'd love to hear a little bit about like the designer's philosophy between balancing or crossing the chasm, as we've been talking about for years now, like changing design of Ubuntu to appeal to like mainstream users versus balancing that need of like, well, the power users, I guess. Like, so for instance, like, okay, so my pet feature would be focus files mouse. Like, it's really doesn't work well, and I know that, but I accept it because I'm a power user. I know that Unity's not like, it's not really hitting my sweet spot, but I'm just wondering like, what you guys thought on balancing those.
So I remember quite a few years ago when OS X came out, and I've got lots of developer friends, and there was a big switch at that point to developers moving over to OS X, because they were like, yes, I've got Unix with a nice interface, and I can run Microsoft Word. And if this was quite a few years ago, that was quite a big thing. So I don't think there's necessarily a tension there, not necessarily. There's a number of things that we need to do to improve the experience for power users that we haven't done yet. And coming up with a decent solution for Focus Follows Mouse is something we're aware of and we're thinking about, and hopefully we will manage, fingers crossed.
I'm curious about like, you know, your philosophical approach to like, you know, what are the things you think about in terms of balancing out the way you approach, you know, when you're thinking about design things, okay, power users versus, you know, mainstream users?
So a lot, the way we get to good design, it's similar to how to get to good development, is work in a very iterative approach, where you design something, you user test something, and on the basis of the test you iterate your design and your testing. As we were biased to the power users to begin with, and as we've got a brilliant community who's very involved and very focused, the power user segment has always been very well represented in the Ubuntu ecosystem. The problem is the non-power user segment has been very underrepresented. So when we started this process of doing a lot of user testing, we made a conscious decision to focus very much on the consumer technical user. We do user testing not on people who couldn't use computers, people who said they'd use a computer for fun for at least 10 hours a week, people who considered themselves to be experts, but they were Windows users or Mac users. And that's informed a lot of our design thinking, and that's our check. now what we've done is we need to switch back to power users. So we're now including developers in those user testing iterations. One other thing is, I think if you look at what defines a power user, it's kind of more heavy multitasking, it's more extensive use of the system, it's running more applications, it's more switching, potentially tiling, window management, other things. So they're generally just stressing the design and stressing how something's built more than someone who's running less applications. So there are cases, but I don't think there are many. I don't think there's actually a big fundamental conflict there.
Is focus follows mouse on your radar?
Yes.
You know about it.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. We were talking about that last week.
Can you guys like blog about that? Because that would really like.
No.
Some of us have been getting flamed over this. You know, we don't care about power user stuff, and then what you just said is basically the best thing I've heard you say in 6 months. So I think if you could like get the word out there. No, because a lot of people feel like disenfranchised, right? They're like, I want my focus follows mouse, and I like window maker. You know? Yeah, whatever.
Well, we have to avoid the problem of over-promising in that, getting accused of talking about vaporware all the time. We talk about this many things, and we're now launching things that we were talking about 2 years ago. Right. People have been waiting 2 years. They've gone, they never deliver. So we're aware of the focus follows mouse issue. We don't have a solution for it at the moment.
Right.
It's something that we're working on, but
right. I'm saying just that sentence is all people need. Just saying, look, it's on my radar. I just don't have time right now. It's better than now they hear nothing, so they assume that you're just ignoring them.
So we've got on the Ivhana design on Launchpad. If we mark something as confirmed or opinion, that means we're aware of it. It's on our radar, but we haven't yet got to processing that lead.
So, this is very relevant. The issue George has brought up has come up in the community council even for just larger interactions between the community and Canonical, and that it has not always been completely clear when Canonical has something presented to it that people feel should be done, but they're not going to devote engineering or time and resources to doing it. But they have absolutely no objection to the community volunteering or stepping in, right? And so if it's an issue like design considerations over something that you don't have time to work with, making it clearer, such as in the Launchpad itself, that like this is on our radar, but like if you want to do it and not us, that would be great, right?
And so, there can be, so when we get a lot of things coming through Launchpad, a lot of things say, I would like X button over here, or I would like, a feature, a link that does this in this specific place. And how we say to design question is not, that's the very last step you get to. That's, I want X button. The first thing is, what is the requirement? Is there a problem here? And then when you think of what the requirement and the problem is, you explore the different ways of solving it. And then adding that button in that one location, that might be the correct answer. But there's several other correct answers.
So I want to draw this out as this is a key fundamental cultural thing about design. And it's actually a technique I learned from Larry Wall. But it is when you get 100 people all requesting something, they may be requesting 100 different solutions. Don't just assume that each of their solutions is the right one, but take a step back in the abstract and try to understand what the real problem is, and then step forward to what the real solution is.
Right. And so my assertion, and this is something we're going to be looking at this cycle for larger, canonical community interaction in general, is using Launchpad and things like bug tags to make it clear where you are actually spending your time, or rather more importantly, where you're not. Right. And so if something is, a legitimate issue, but is something that someone else needs to deal with, right? We don't close it or we don't ignore it. We just tag it.
To give an example, the Ubuntu documentation team raised a bug a little while ago, requesting that there was a link to the documentation in the launcher. Now, backtracking that, the problem that they're actually trying to solve is documentation isn't visible enough. Or you go even further back and you go that people are having problems that require documentation to solve. So that's one possible option. There are a series of other solutions. You know, there can be links in the indicators. You can have links to contextual help kind of throughout the operating system. Maybe that's not the correct solution. And so there's a bit of tuning and fromming in Launchpad to kind of pull that back to, okay, let's agree that we've got the problem.
So you have to start from, what the user wants to perform, what's in between, what's the problem between, what they want to do.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. So one thing I've noticed is that there are lots of decisions made that fall to different councils and community teams and different people, but that to me seem like design issues, and the design team isn't making those decisions, or isn't even having very much input on those decisions. And one of those examples, and I could be completely wrong about this, but one of the examples is default applications. You guys can design a user experience that's really nice and consistent, but if we drop, I know I'm about to anger like 90% of the room, but if we drop Thunderbird and Banshee in there, now we have applications that are not designed like we design Ubuntu applications. They don't look like Ubuntu applications. And that's a design issue, is it not?
Yeah, there's a simple example of that. Last release, there was a decision early on to drop Evolution and replace it with Thunderbird. Right. And Evolution has a calendar, Thunderbird does not. And we have a calendar as part of our clock menu that assumes that Evolution is going to be installed. If Evolution is not installed, it doesn't do anything. And that's still an unsolved problem in the design. So, yeah, we should have more input into that process.
Because I understand that everyone loves Thunderbird and it's this great email app, but we're not just, I mean, if we're really serious about design, then it's not just about dropping all the apps that all of us Ubuntu people love into the default, but it's about designing a consistent experience.
So to take the example of Thunderbird, we were quite heavily involved in that decision over a course of about a year and a half before it happened. So we've been, as well as kind of contributing code back upstream, we contribute design back upstream. So the first thing is we have been collaborating with the Thunderbird people to do user testing. So we kind of paid for and managed a series of user testing on Thunderbird. We flew Thunderbird people over to London. We did that. We had a whole set of findings. From those findings, we pushed back to Thunderbird. Thunderbird made a set of updates. Then we repeated that again. So before we knew this decision was coming up and there were pros and cons. So then we did a round of comparative testing between Thunderbird and Evolution, where we got a number of users in and did user testing. All those results we published publicly as well, all on the design blog. And then once we had started saying, okay, we're thinking about shifting to Thunderbird, we were then engaging with the Thunderbird designers. So if you notice, Thunderbird has got a new theme. It's not as good as we'd like to get, but I think it's a great start. Looking at the Thunderbird Unity integration. So we've been working quite closely with that upstream to try and evolve it. One of the key things in that choice to us is, and there's a trade-off here, but we know from user testing that if someone sits down at a computer and they see Firefox and they see Skype, they don't actually see the operating system. They don't care whether it's Windows, Mac, Ubuntu. They see their applications that they know how to use and the brands they associate with. And we don't have that many of these strong branded cross-platform applications on Ubuntu, but we do have a couple, and Thunderbird's one. So it's very helpful for the people for the switching from Mac or PC to Ubuntu use case.
Familiarity.
I understand that point. Sometimes it seems like it's almost like we're not confident in our own brand, and so we need to borrow the brands of other things. Because if you boot up OS X for the first time, they've got iCal, they've got Apple Mail.app, they've got their stuff that's not what you've used ever before, and everybody loves it.
Yeah.
That's just a resourcing issue. I wish I had 15 guys per application, but we just...
Yeah. We have to use the best of the open source ecosystem that we're trying to bring that together. We can't build an entire ecosystem like Apple.
And
I don't think we want to either.
Part of the idea around this, say building up community user experience teams, is to try to I would say sort of spread that idea of design and thinking through user experience all the way through the applications. Because we've managed to hire a very tiny number of designers who can look at a tiny bit of the user experience, but there is a huge amount of the user experience throughout the entire distribution that it involves like coordinating with upstreams and thinking about how that integrates with the whole look and feel of Unity. And that work really isn't happening, and it's work that if we can, it actually, interestingly, we still have the same problem we had 3 years ago of how do we recruit designers into the Ubuntu community, because it is a very different problem than recruiting developers. But there's a huge amount of work that can be done specifically in applications.
I think the real point that Alan is trying to get at, though, is when we're taking a look at things like Thunderbird, that we shouldn't just look at Thunderbird and just look at how Thunderbird behaves with Unity, but look what Thunderbird behaves with, control panel, or with the indicator in the panel, or how it behaves with, your contacts after you encounter app, how it behaves with the other apps, not just how it behaves by itself, not just how it behaves with Unity, but how it behaves as an entire operating system.
And that's what we did. That's exactly.
Mozilla hired a guy whose job is to integrate Thunderbird into Ubuntu. Well, the indicator, and he's working on all those things.
And that was on the basis of the relationship we started off with that, but through doing the user testing. They're paying for 1 FTE purely on Unity integration, and we're working through that. It's a work in progress, but that's...
Thunderbird is actually a really good example of what we'd like to do across all the applications, because they just dove right in. They were totally responsive. We met with them every week. It was just this really good collaborative experience between the designers and the folks who were packaging Thunderbird for Ubuntu.
They've also been very supportive of the community, specifically in Vancouver, but they do reach out and they do assist us with things. And
I threw out Thunderbird as an example off the top of my head, but are there times when there are decisions being made that are design decisions that aren't being made by you guys?
Well, and we don't want to say that the canonical design team is responsible for making all these decisions, but it would be great to have the designers who we have, who are part of the community. It would be great to have them involved in this. And some examples are like it was thrown around this cycle whether we should get rid of Tomboy or not. And I actually asked John, because I was like, well, what impact would this have on the stuff? Because they have some integration into the Unity shell for Tomboy, and what impact would this have? And I think we need to be doing more of that. I think that's a very good point.
One of the things that GNOME 3 is famously trashed for is the lack of configurability. And as Ubuntu has moved to GNOME 3, some of that has come in, and that makes it really difficult. If I have an idea about what this might look good or that might look good, you have to know the back-end pieces, maybe QML files, whatever, to modify to make those happen. It makes it very hard as a community member to participate. I wonder how that's being addressed.
It's very strange. We've seen in the control center, they've been pulling out bits of configurability. In other areas, in the web accounts, they've been pulling out some of the configurability. Unity's a young project, and we're in the process of trying to add in more and more configurability. We're not there yet. We know we've got a long way to go. But our objective is to add in more configurability, make everything likable and extensible. And it seems that, I find it very strange that GNOME's going the other direction.
Yeah. And to some extent, it's just because we don't have the resources to reverse some of those kinds of mistakes, like when GNOME decides to remove screensavers, for example. And our users want screensavers, but we don't have the resources to re-implement it.
So there is an understanding within Canonical Ubuntu that regardless of what GNOME 3 is doing, we would like that, and Ubuntu has time commits to add it.
I mean, we're slowly building outwards. And as we're slowly kind of building outwards around Unity, we want things to be open and extensible and pluggable and configurable. That's our objective. And there's some cases where we're thinking about having to replace bits of GNOME with stuff that we're designing and we're building because they've pulled that out.
In light of configurability, there was quite a bit of discussion of considering the upgrade case and having to deal with old configuration and will drastically change the design. And so someone has used Lucid, for instance, and changed various bits of things, and then they upgrade, and their experience when they upgrade is very different from what's been designed, because we're preserving old settings to some extent, and it might look terrible, and they think less of us for that reason. And I wanted to get a sense of how much effort is put into seeing what old settings you can preserve and seeing which ones we should just destroy when we upgrade.
It's a very difficult problem, and it's the flip side of configurability. Every additional item we make more configurable, it means there's another set of permutations to test and make sure everything works in every other different combination. And this upgrade, in the upgrade case, we've got loads of permutations, more than we can test. And
so it's not unreasonable to just declare what we're not testing and destroy those settings.
No,
yeah, I've talked to Jason about that. I can fill you in on that.
Okay.
We're killing all. Yeah, that's going away. Sick of people getting upgrades to get like 2 power indicators because they followed wrong advice on the internet. And Unity breaks and it's our fault. We're working on fixing that. Sorry.
Well, I just want to reiterate what George said earlier, that some of this stuff, I think it would be very helpful if we had an explicit blog post saying, like, we're not getting rid of screensavers because, like, for the lulz, we just don't have the resources. Because a lot of people are just really pissed off at a lot of things that they shouldn't be pissed off about.
Just follow PT on Twitter, right?
So I think this is related.
Last cycle, but
I think this is related to Mark's slide yesterday about power users and improving the experience for them in this cycle. Can you speak to any specifics?
Okay, one thing that is a big gap, and it's important for power users, and we know, which again is an item we just haven't got there yet, is the multi-monitor work. So hopefully if we've got time at the end of the session, we can show you the prototype of some of the things we're thinking on and trying to build not just a passable. At the moment we've got a broken multi-monitor experience. It would be quite easy to build a passable multi-monitor experience. What we actually want to do is build a really great multi-monitor experience. So we've, again, and it's a difficult thing to do because it's a piece of design that's very, it's very tactile, it's about timing, it's about feeling, so that's why we've been exploring it a lot in the prototype. So that's one thing for power users. Explicitly, at the moment we've got a bunch of configurability options in CCSM. CCSM's horrible, there are all sorts of ways to kill your computer just by selecting checkboxes. So we're looking at pulling things out of CCSM and making some explicit Unity configuration. We've also got a big stack of bugs. Our design debt has grown, and we want to pay some of that off. And every bug that gets reported to Ayatana Design gets at least read. It will, and they do get triaged. And so I think tackling a lot of those bugs inside those that have been reported, there'll be a lot of issues that we'll fix.
Yeah, I think communicating these are all great things, and communicating these in a clear manner will help reduce community friction from a lot of contributors.
Yeah, just your stance, just your question on configurability alone is killing. Like all cycle, everyone's like, well, the design team's gonna, no one wants to configure your desktop, Unix is dying, blah blah blah. And in 2 sentences, we just totally clarified everything.
It's difficult. We're a very, very small team, and there's not enough hours in the day. And so a lot of our communication is focused around Launchpad. Because in Launchpad we're getting explicit issues and we're triaging them and we can put them into the work basket.
OMG is probably where most of the people are reading right now. So
yeah, I read it to find out what I've been doing.
And just say loud and clear, look, we're taking care of the issue. Now let's move forward.
Just saying, I'm not anti-configuration, I just don't have time right now and I'm trying to build and I'm building out.
All right, can you write about this? Thanks.
Good question. We need to know about what exactly should at which time, so that we can write about it.
So yeah, contacts.
But what he was saying about tagging, I mean, if there was a tag, these guys could just search that tag.
I
thought they searched all the tags anyway.
This cycle, so design bugs, we've got a kind of funky system, because there's a difference in the design process and the implementation process. And the implementation process is split up to a lot of upstreams and downstreams, whether it's being built by the DX team, whether it's distro patching. And it's difficult to get a view on Launchpad of all of these bugs. So I've been working with Didier, and we've built a tool, then we've got another session about it, that shows all the design bugs across all the upstreams and downstreams and their relevant statuses. I think we've got a session later on this week to discuss that.
So I don't think
workflow
designers
more
need to become full-time bloggers either. I mean, we've got great Ubuntu blogs.
Those two sentences.
Well, come to the session later in the week, and cool.
So maybe you talked about this yesterday in the community session, but I'm wondering, like, I come across a lot of different people. You know, I don't just know hackers, but I come across designers as well. And you know, if I was mentoring a university student, like, how do I contribute open source? I say, there's a well-known process, like send a patch. This is how you do it. Walk through that. Is there something similar to help integrate designers into like our process, or is that even something you're even thinking about or even want? I mean, I feel like there's a gap between like, you know, this is the cultural gap that Alison talking about. It's like, you know, for patches, yes, we want more patches. Do you even want more designers? How do they?
So this is what the previous session, and what Alison's got some more sessions looking at exactly this. The very short answer is, I'd say that we're very limited resources. We can only focus on a small bit of the Ubuntu experience, and we shouldn't be treated as a bottleneck. And the other things, for design to work, you need high bandwidth communication between the designers and the developers. So if you know a designer and you're a developer, work with them. Build something great. You don't have to rely on us. You know, Canonical's one part of the Ubuntu community, and at the moment we've got a problem of there's a perception that everything has to go through us, and that's not correct. You know, if you're a developer and you're a designer and you know how to package things, you can go and improve something. And yeah, you can submit a patch, or build an application, or improve an experience in some way.
I'd say there's something important and fundamental here, and that is developers who are used to the submit a patch way. It's hard to get their heads around the fact that contributing to design is not about, okay, I've made my change to the design, now I throw it at you. It's much more fundamental. It's much more, you start with I see this problem in the user experience, and then collaboration is about going through the whole journey and then together reaching the conclusion. So
we could share the process, not the solution.
It's a different process. And one of the things we're going to try to work on this cycle is to pick, and this is the session later this week, pick one user experience and try to build out a community team that is like, a designer, a developer, a packager, and see if we can kind of build those community processes around how you do collaboration in a design space, which is a little bit different than how you do it in the development space.
Yeah, I guess I was just asking about the vocabulary of, like, again, talking to a mentor or talking to a student, like, yeah, submit a patch, this is how you do it, but like, talking to a designer, how do I get involved in open source design? I don't even know what the words to say. It's like,
yeah, and this is something that, like, there aren't many free software communities that are exploring this. So, like, there's no template we can just drop in and say, here's how you do free software collaboration around design. So it's very much sort of exploring the process and exploring how to build up those people relationships.
I wanted to comment also about the workflow. I covered this a little bit before. I know that when I see a bug, sometimes I think I submitted a really good bug, and then it gets marked by Hannah that opinion or won't fix. And I see the statuses as about the same thing. You mentioned just
there's a big difference between those statuses.
Okay, but I think that may not be communicated very well.
I agree.
You said that you use opinion or.
So it's acknowledged. It's an issue. It's something that we need to come to and look at, but we're not yet at the point of being able to do that, because either resource, or there's a project in the pipeline that'll deal with part of it, or there's several other conflicting bugs that are looking around the same problem space, and we need to go through and explore them, or we need to look at the problem wider. So the opinion bucket is a kind of, it's not invalid, it's not won't fix, but it's not we're going to fix immediately. It's our bucket of work to dip into, or come to later.
What you just described to me is often used, classified as a wish list sort of bug on Launchpad, and then opinion is often used for things where won't fix is a legitimate issue that you are just not going to fix because it will go away for some reason, like you're transitioning the package or whatever. And we usually use opinion for things where the person responsible, the developer, says, I don't think this is something that should be changed, or it's not worth the trade-offs, or it's basically won't fix, except for it's sort of more serious, like I don't think it's even a problem. And
That's,
so
actually, the ambiguity of the opinion status is one of the things that's been raised to, in general, in Launchpad for this cycle.
Yeah.
So,
but I think if we just had it on the wiki page, this is what we're using these statuses for. This is what it means for us. That would be
it's a valid opinion,
But
and
still-
more work's required to go from valid to
Still gets acknowledged.
Yeah.
So
You've
generally,
seen it,
opinion
yeah.
is used for intractable problems, so I think it should be red, I think it should be blue.
Yeah.
So the rest of them, there is no right answer, there is no wrong answer, it's purely a difference of opinion. And that's normally what opinion is used for, so I appreciate that other people may be used to that, and it would perhaps need to better explain if we use non-standard meanings for stuff.
But it's acknowledged. So many people will start sharing the same opinion, become more relevant.
So I'd like to follow up that a little bit. In Launchpad, opinion means it's not searchable by default.
Great.
And also there's a history in Launchpad itself of communicating useful bugs that Mark Shuttleworth or Ubuntu or whoever is like, this is the wrong answer. So when I see a bug marked opinion, I believe that means that I am being treated as this is the wrong answer to it. And so if you're going to be using it differently, I appreciate maybe a blog post or communicating more to
So there's a page which talks about, there's a wiki page on wiki.ubuntu.com that talks about contributing bugs to Unity, which we've just changed our process slightly. So when we haven't, it's on my to-do list to update this page. There's some other things to be aware of, the other statuses. So triaged means that change has been signed off, officially approved, but it hasn't yet been handed over to developers. Fixed committed means it's been handed over to a developer. And then fixed release comes after it's been fixed release in both the upstream and the downstream, saying that we've actually looked at the implementation, reviewed it, and the implementation meets spec. So we use the same. It's all the other ones are quite a bit different as well.
Yes.
So I need to get that on the wiki page. I know.
It's one of the problems of doing design bugs in system design for programming bugs.
We're coming up on the end of the session. Did you want to do that demo? Or?
Yeah.
I want to see what it is.
Demo of
plugging that in.
It's a break now. We've fled into the break by the
Okay. Well, should we? Any other questions while Stuart finishes setting it up?
Getting back to the configuration thing, have you looked at, like, right now, even to change my fonts or my sideline theme, yeah, no shell, no preschool. Are those things communicated or sending out?
Yes. We'll probably start off with relatively, we haven't done the work. We know there are a couple of bits we need to look at, that's one of them, and we're going to go through all those options and come up with kind of a subset of those options.
So you are working on bringing those back?
Yeah. We've also got a set of bugs related to font scaling and use of different fonts. So changing fonts can introduce a set of bugs in other places, which we also know we need to fix. Okay.
So Stuart, you've been working on the multi-monitor design.
I have indeed, yeah. So there were some very sort of fine interactions we needed to get right with the multi-monitor design. So we were considering how best to support people in terms of productivity with multiple screens. What you're looking at here is a 6-screen setup, but obviously our main use cases are for 2 displays side by side, possibly 2 displays vertically. The reason we have the 6 displays is we want to make sure that whatever design we come up with scales well. So we were concentrating on, in particular, on use cases where you might concentrate on a space and use that to do work with particular applications. So we're investigating the notion of a launcher on each display. So in order to achieve that, we actually catch the cursor lightly at the edge of the screen, so that we can then display the launcher, so that you can pick one of your applications and the windows appear where you choose them on the launcher. So in terms of making the best possible use of your space, we're looking at how to best support that. These interactions at the edge, what they also help us support is good side-by-side maximise behaviours. So again, we lightly catch the cursor at the edges of the screen when you're doing things like dragging windows, so that we can really get a good sort of side-by-side maximise interaction. And we also then use, in considering the launcher, we have the same icons on each launcher, so that you don't have to basically check each screen out to see where your applications are. So we made a decision to have the same applications on each launcher. What we do, there's some subtle differences between the indicators then. So if you have a filled indicator, it shows that the application is running on this particular space. If you have a hollowed out indicator, that shows that you do have the application running, but it's in one of your other spaces, not in the space where your launcher is showing. And then we also looked at behaviours to do with spreading. So when you spread, we'll show you on each display the windows on that particular display. And we're also looking at ideas about making new window creation more visible. So where you don't have a window on a particular space, we make it very easy to create one in a highly visible fashion, rather than the shortcut to use the middle mouse button to create a new window, which is still there for power users. People who know this stuff is there. Now we also fully support all the keyboard shortcuts, but what we're just trying to do is surface some of the interactions for users who aren't so familiar with the system.
So what was the four corner? You showed you had some prototype with four corners.
Yeah. So when you click on an application which isn't currently in focus, so we'll choose Firefox here. The first thing we'll do is bring the window to the front in focus. Now you may have noticed the window's here and it pulsed, so we try to give you some signals that you've just brought the window forward. Perhaps you're concentrating on the space, so we pulse the window so that your eye is drawn towards it. So we're trying to overcome things like change brightness. So the first action in this particular case, the application wasn't in focus, we bring it to focus. If you click on an application that is focused, then we spread. And we're quite consistent here. We always spread. And previously, there were some instances where we wouldn't spread. We might do something different. There possibly wasn't even an action. So if the application is focused, then the next time you click it, we spread. And that gives you the ability, obviously, to see which windows you have and to bring them to the front. It also allows you to create new windows easily, because that's all now visible. And what it also allows you to do is move windows across to different displays or different workspaces. So we can pick these windows up and even put them onto different workspaces, and then bring them to the front to work with them. So we're looking at some quite advanced concepts here as well, like a different workspace on each display. There are obviously technical feasibility studies that we need to consider whether that's possible. In the prototype, we've given some thought for that. So we have one global stacking order, and each window is tagged with the particular workspace and display it belongs to. So they all actually stack when they start to overlap. So a window is deemed to belong to a display if the majority of its space is in that display, and then they belong to the workspaces you assign it to. So if we spread, because the majority of that window is now in this workspace, we know that's where it belongs in the spread.
So currently you've made the choice to keep the top bar visible on all of the monitors.
We have, yes. So again, we prioritise in this particular instance the case for not having to move great distances in order to achieve something on the particular display that is your focus potential. There are other possible use cases where you may well want to make more freer use of the space. So this is our typical extended desktop mode, if you like. So you could have a spanned desktop mode, is something we're looking at, where all of this space is actually represented by just one single single desktop space. In that case, you have the top bar across the top and just the one launcher. You can maximise windows, they maximise across the whole space, or you can just freeform tile your windows by resizing them and moving them. Obviously that helps support things like display walls, gaming as well. There are use cases we support with that display mode.
Are there any particular aspects you're very pleased with in your initial research?
So one thing we knew was going to be very tricky to achieve is the launcher reveal, because what we're doing is we are stopping the cursor at the edge there. So if you push hard, then you go straight through, and that was one of the things we were concerned about, that how much resistance do we provide there? Because another thing that people want to do is move the cursor across displays quickly and easily. So we spent a lot of time finessing that particular interaction to make sure that it's not, it's not irritating when we have perhaps use cases where someone's working on a window here, they've put some of their tool windows or pallets here, and they want to move across this boundary quickly and often. So, we were mindful that, we wanted to get that just about right. And I think, we sort of made a good, struck a good balance there.
Thank you very much. I'm sure people will enjoy seeing the design. See what else you come up with.
Great.
They're laughing about something right now.